Welcome to Conversations in Music. I'm your host, Byrd, and on today, we sit with a gentleman who wears many hats. He's an incredible guitarist, an amazing songwriter, and a concert promoter who has produced his own festivals. To date, he's released 27 studio albums, and he's done it his way. He has a very unique voice on guitar and a very interesting approach to songwriting. He's also the director of programming for UAB's Alys Center. Take a second and please share this video with any aspiring songwriters or musicians you may know. This episode will be very, very enlightening. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Essix. Welcome to the conversation.
What's up, brother?
Not much, brother. How you doing?
Man, I'm pretty good, man. Pretty good. Excited to have you on tonight.
Man, look, I'm excited to be here, man.
Cool. Yeah,
Honored.
man. Yeah, I kind of didn't know where to start, man. You wear so many different hats, which is the thing that really intrigues me about you.
Yeah.
You're not just a musician. You found a way to make music work in several different avenues for you.
Yeah.
But let's start. Let's actually get a little bit of history of when you started playing guitar.
Yeah. There was that iconic moment that a ton of guitar players experienced. You probably heard this story before. Watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, man. I was 4 years old.
4?
Yeah.
That's really young. Okay.
4 years old. And I don't know what it was, man. To this day, I really can't tell you what it was, but I was captivated by those guys, just like millions of other people around the world during that time. Nobody had ever seen anything like them before, I think. And as a little kid, just the guitars themselves was just something that fascinated me for some reason. I remember immediately after seeing them on television, and I remind you, I was 4 years old and I can still remember this.
Yeah.
My aunt had a tennis racket. She was taking tennis in college, and there was a tennis racket around the house, and I was just going around the house playing the tennis racket like it was guitar.
You're strumming it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like from that point on, it was a wrap. I knew that I wanted to play the guitar, and I knew that I wanted to be specifically George Harrison, who was kind of like the lead guitarist in the group,
Yeah, for sure.
I knew right away.
Gotcha. That's interesting.
Yeah.
4 years old. Like,
Yeah.
I was put into it by my parents at 5, but I didn't connect until honestly about 12, 13. So
Wow.
you connecting that early says a lot.
Yeah, that early I knew. I took maybe 2 piano lessons because my mom and grandmother really wanted me to play guitar. So there was a lady who taught piano down the street from my house. And so I took 2 or 3 lessons from her. And she was one of those old school teachers who, when you made a mistake, she would hit you with this little 6-inch ruler.
Yeah.
And dude, I had like 2 lessons of that. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is not going to be for me.
Yeah. Cool. So did you actually have formal training on guitar? Yes, actual training on guitar?
Yeah, I took 1 guitar lesson. My mom took me to this guy, young guy, who was a guitar teacher, and I took 1 lesson. The only thing I ever learned during a formal lesson was how to tune the guitar. Very valuable lesson, but I never went back after that.
Wow. Why not? What you didn't connect with that either?
Yeah, it's like to this day, I really don't know. I don't know why I never went back to another lesson, but I just didn't. And I knew the kind of music that I wanted to play. I knew the kind of music that I listened to was what I wanted to play. And for some reason in my young mind, I didn't think that this guy could teach me the kind of music that I wanted to play. And so I never went back. I just taught myself how to play, just like a lot of folks, by lifting the needle off the record and listening to the radio,
That's
Yeah.
interesting. So all these moments that you're speaking of, I had these moments in my teens because I started classical.
Yeah. Okay.
And I just didn't connect with it, you know. And I started playing in church a little bit later, but you had these moments really, really early, which is quite fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so how did your actual building of a repertoire of skill with the guitar, how did that progress with you just kind of doing it yourself?
Fairly rapidly, actually.
Mm,
I got
okay.
pretty proficient at being able to, and this is weird because most people learn the guitar in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to play single notes quicker and more proficiently right off the bat than I did
Yeah.
chords. Because I didn't have formal training, I didn't really understand how to make chords on the instrument. I just kind of stumbled into how to form chords on the guitar. But the
Right.
single note thing is, and almost like improvising at a very
Mm-hmm.
early age, I got that right away. It's real
Okay.
weird. And I think Wes Montgomery had something to do with that, because when I first heard his California Dreamin' album, I noticed that you were able to play melodies that people sang with their voices on an instrument. And that fascinated me. It's particularly being able to do that on the guitar.
Yeah.
I before Wes, I couldn't grasp that concept. The guitar had always been like a supporting instrument to me. Like you're
Right. Right.
singing and playing guitar, that made sense to me. Somebody playing a melody on the guitar
Mm-hmm.
didn't make sense. And when I heard it, I was completely blown away. So as a result, I started trying to learn how to play those melodies on the instrument, single notes, and I learned how to do that first.
Okay. Okay. Now, another thing with guitarists that I also find fascinating is a lot of times you guys find an axe and
Yeah.
that becomes your baby.
Right.
Drummers, they switch out kits, keyboard players. We may go through tons of different keyboards. Excuse me, but guitarists and sometimes bass players, they find that axe. When did you connect with that particular axe? And what was it about that particular sound and that axe and everything that made you just connect with it?
That's a great question, because I'm as you're asking me that, I'm starting to remember what instrument was it that I really connected with, because the very first instrument I had was terrible. It was I don't want to call the name of the actual
Yeah.
instrument, but it was horrible. It wasn't set up so my fingers literally bled because the string was so far off the neck, and it was
Mm,
difficult to play, wasn't enjoyable to play, but because I wanted to learn so bad, I kept at it. So
yeah.
maybe the first three instruments I owned, um, I you know I ended up getting rid of them very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that the very first instrument that I ever had that I really connected with is one that I still actually have, Wes.
Mm-hmm.
It's that Strat that I play all the time. I bought
Ah,
that instrument. Yeah, I got that thing in the 70s,
wow.
late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Yeah.
And I've had it to this day. I still play gigs with that guitar.
Mm-hmm.
When I
Mm-hmm.
was at Berklee, I had just gotten a deal with Ibanez, and Ibanez had given me a couple of guitars for free. And living in Boston, I didn't know that if you get parking tickets, your car will get towed after you get 5 of them. And so I got 5 parking tickets, and they picked up my car. I had to end up selling those 2 guitars to get my car out of impound.
Wow.
So when I was all the years that I was at Berklee, I only had 1 guitar, and it was that Strat.
Mm,
And if you're there, you're on the subway with that guitar, you're in class with that guitar. It's like I bonded with that instrument.
yeah.
It became an extension of who
Mm,
I was. And so I would say that Strat that I have, that I still have to this day was that instrument for me. I just really bonded with, connected with.
Gotcha. I know you also have what you call Big Red. When did you connect with Big Red? And tell people what
Yeah,
that is.
that was the next instrument that I really connected with and became really people knew that guitar. I think before they knew me, before they saw my face, they saw that guitar and was like, "Oh, that's Eric." I played that guitar for about 24 years, and it was the only instrument that I played for 24 years. All the travel, everything that I did, I took that guitar all around the world. As I got as time wore on, it became more and more difficult for me to play that guitar. And so now I have another red guitar, a Gibson ES335, which is a little bit easier to play. And so that's Big Red 2.0.
What's the difference in the two that made it easier?
The neck is a little bit slimmer and faster, and it's, you know, a little bit easier to play than the other one. Yeah, I had to fight with that Howard Roberts a little bit.
I got you.
Yeah,
yeah. I see a icon there behind you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Jimmy, and you mentioned Wes Montgomery earlier. Who were some of your early mentors, man? That outside of Wes that you heard and it was like, okay, that's somebody. Maybe not only playing wise, but just as a career, it's like, okay, this guy has something different happening that I like.
Yeah, it was definitely Jimmy after Wes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Wes was 1968. I remember because I think that's when that record came out, California Dreaming. And Jimmy passed away in September 1970, I believe. So I never got to actually see him play, but I think that it was his death that really that started me to actually find out and learn a little bit more about who he was. You know, he passed away. It was such a big thing. And I said, man, who is this guy? How is this guy, you know?
Yeah.
And as I began to explore his music, and it was the Electric Ladyland album. I think that was maybe the last record he did before he died. That double album that was like nothing anyone had ever heard before. That got me, and I was like, man, I don't know how in the world I missed this guy. And it was a wrap after that. So all of my high school years, from all the way through 1977, it was all Jimi Hendrix for me. You know? Combination of different people, but Jimmy was always in the center. Yeah, huge influence, and I never tried to play like him, but there were certain things about the way he played that I tried to emulate. A few things. I just admired the style and just the whole swagger. You know, probably just the coolest person to ever pick up a guitar.
Yeah. So and before Jimmy, nobody had really kind of tapped that or reset the rock and roll thing, right?
Yeah, you know, he was an anomaly. There weren't many black guys that were playing a guitar like Jimmy, first of all. And so that was one of the things that really attracted me to him. I was like, is a brother playing like this, you know, playing this kind of music? And it was all rooted in the blues. You know, he listened to Muddy Waters and all the great blues players. So I kind of understood the blues aspect of it, but nobody was doing the whole rock and roll thing and just the way he did it. There weren't many brothers playing quite like Jimmy. And so that was another thing that, you know, really attracted me to him.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when did music become the career, the money maker, and the thing that this is what I'm gonna do when I get up in the morning? I'm gonna set my mind to do this, and this is gonna be what's gonna take care of me and put money in my pocket and pay my bills and all that good stuff.
Wow. Yeah. So that didn't come along until much later in my career, because there was an 11-year stretch there after I'd gone to college. I went to UAB for a few years, and I went to Southern Adventist University for a couple of years. And so I was kind of trying to find my way, man. You know, I knew that I loved music. I knew it was something I really enjoyed doing, but I couldn't really see that as a career. I couldn't visualize it. I didn't understand how to get there. And so it was after I had been working at UPS for a number of years that I decided that I wanted to go to Berklee. And that was a whole experience in and of itself, just really wanting to take music to the next level. And it was pretty much after I left UPS and went to Berklee. I said, you know, if I'm going to do this, I got to be all in. Can't be, you know, waffling about what I'm going to do. I got to be committed to it in order for me to be successful at it. And so leaving UPS and the comfort of that job and the income and the salary. And once I did that, I was like, hey, I'm out here now. I got to make this thing work.
Yeah.
And so that's probably when I really, really got serious about it and really tried to pursue it as a career. I actually had two albums out before I got to Berklee. I'd already done 2 albums, but still couldn't just see this as the one thing that I wanted to do to make it, you know, my living and my career. But after I, you know, left UPS, I was like, okay, it's a wrap. I got to do this. I got to pursue it.
Now, you make that sound seamless, but you don't just leave UPS and go to Berklee. Berklee is, for our viewers who may not know, is one of the most prestigious music schools in the country, if not the world. You know, people come from all over the world. So how do you go from UPS? That's not a straight line. I don't care how you look at it. It's not a straight line. So how do you get from UPS? And I always tell people this when we talk about stories and careers. Every day on that job, you're doing music. I ain't gonna say a side hustle, but you're doing music as well. You're putting out music. What's the day-to-day that takes you to a transition or a breaking point to say, I got to get to a place like Berklee if I want to further this on a level that's competitive in the industry? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I actually know the answer to that question very well.
Okay.
Because it was a real turning point in my life. You know my boy Sean Michael Ray, my good friend, and we've been working together since the beginning in the 80s. He and I were I think both our very first bands together. And so we've been playing around Birmingham, doing the club dates, and you know, the little band that we were in, Souvenir, was doing well, had a little reputation, you know. And I started becoming more aware of what was going on musically around the city of Birmingham. And people would come out to hear me play. Musicians would come out to hear me play. So this one guy came out, saw me play, said, hey man, I got a gig coming up next week or whatever it was, and I need a guitar player. My guitar player can't make it. He said, can you fill in? And I said, I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe I could. It was a reggae band. I was like, oh, reggae. Yeah, I can play reggae. So you have to remember at this time, I still had no formal musical training at all. I couldn't tell you what a C chord was on guitar. I could play it, but I couldn't tell you anything about theory, notes, chords, no knowledge of that whatsoever. But I had a great ear, you know, and I think I developed it probably from singing in the choirs and stuff in church and learning how to sing harmonies and that kind of thing, and just kind of stumbled onto a good ear. So I get on this gig and didn't know any of the music, of course. I'm subbing for a guy, and the guy starts to call out changes from on the bandstand, and I'm like a deer in the headlights. Didn't know what the heck he was talking about, and couldn't play. And that first set, the guy after the first set, which went horribly, it was one of the most embarrassing moments in my life. This guy proceeds to, like, in front of the rest of the band, just like air me out about not really being a real musician. I can't read music. I don't know chords. I mean, dude, when I tell you it was the most embarrassing moment in my life, it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I deserved it. I mean, I
Mm.
didn't know anything about music. So after I, licked my wounds, I don't even think I finished. I don't even think they let me finish the next set. I was that bad.
Wow.
And after that experience, I said, this will never happen to me again.
Mm.
This will never happen to me again. If you know anything about my personality, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So I immediately said, first of all, I'm gonna learn music, and I'm gonna show this guy, this guy
Right.
that, you can't get me twice. You can only, I'm only gonna take that one time.
Mm.
And I found out about Berklee and started to read up about it. It was in some guitar player magazines, and I was like, okay. After I kind of got a little bit of music under my belt,
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, I'm gonna try, see if I can get into Berklee. And I applied and got accepted on
Wow.
the strength of an audition tape. At that time, you could send in an audition tape and they would evaluate your playing. And so I got in. A little bit later, I got a little bit sidetracked, let my application or my acceptance run out. I ended up having to apply again. But in the interim, I had done 2 records with Nova Records, a record label
Mm-hmm.
out of California. So I applied again and immediately got a scholarship that I didn't even apply for. They just gave me a scholarship. They were like, okay, here's a scholarship that'll help pay for like most of your tuition. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, this is a no-brainer at this point. I gotta go.
Right.
And so that's how I wound. That's how I wound up at Berklee. I think the strength of having a record out with a label, a noted label,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of added a little bit more weight to my application, and that's how I got in.
So you get to Berklee, and Berklee is the best of the best.
Yeah.
All over the world, all over the country, best of the best. What was the biggest adjustment for you, or what was the biggest wake up call that, because you're playing catch up at this point,
Yes.
you're playing catch up, and it's not really a level playing field because of, the previous
Yeah.
years of you. So what was that? What was those years like at Berklee?
So week 1, first of
This is
all,
wait, this is the beginning. This is week 1. Okay, I'm tuned
week
in.
1. Well, first of all, I got up there really early. So I got there before the school year even started because I wanted to find somewhere to live.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to stay in the dorm, so I needed to find a place to live. And I can tell this story now because my mother, God rest her soul, has passed on. And if she knew that I had done this, while she was alive, she would kill me. But for there were several weeks there, I basically lived out of my car in Boston. Nowhere to live. Couldn't find a place that I could afford. I'd run out of money. I'd run my American Express card up to, it was just, bad
Typical
situation.
musician. That's a typical musician story. Yeah.
Yeah. I had no money, nothing. And I found a friend of mine who was from Birmingham who was going to getting his master's at Harvard.
Mm.
And he let me, stay with him for a while until I found a place. I finally found a place and moved in Harbor Point in Dorchester,
Mm-hmm.
Boston, right next to South Boston.
Yeah.
And so I start school. My scholarship, takes care of my tuition. I start school. The very first week in class, I'm walking down the hall to my first class, and there are guys sitting on the floor on either side of me.
Mm-hmm.
Young guys, all of them had to be like teenagers, right out of high school or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Young guys.
Yeah.
And dude, I saw these young guys playing so much guitar.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just like one after the other. And I'm standing with my guitar on my shoulder. I'm like, what in the world am I doing here? You know,
Yeah.
how I'm in the wrong place. I made the biggest mistake of my life.
Wow.
And basically I had to come to a realization that, like you said, I had a lot of catching up to do. That very first sight reading class,
Mm.
those very first ear training classes, stuff
Mm.
that I had never done before in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, it was very humbling, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from Birmingham, where I wasn't like a big star or anything in Birmingham,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, I had a record out on a record
Yeah.
label, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, national distribution and all this, and then to see 18-year-old guys sitting on the floor waiting to go to class, just burning through notes. It
Yeah.
was a humbling experience.
Yeah.
And I think it really changed me, man. You know, in a lot of ways, I began to think, you know, it, you're not as great as you probably think you are.
Yeah.
And there are guys here who can outplay you, and what it forced me to do is to find my own voice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I knew I couldn't play as well as some of those guys, and I probably, you know, never would be able to play as fast and as technically brilliant as a lot of guys at Berklee. And there were a ton of them.
Yeah.
So most of the guys at Berklee who played, who had a principal instrument, a lot of them were guitar players. I think a third of the
Mm.
school was guitar players at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of great guitar players. Kurt Rosenwinkel was at my school when I was there. Mark Whitfield had just left. You
Oh
know,
yeah. Yeah.
these monster guitar
Yeah.
players.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mike Stern and
Wow.
Schofield and Pat Metheny, you know, had come through the doors of Berklee College of Music.
Yeah.
And so I quickly realized that I can't outplay these guys or keep up with them, but I can have my own voice and I can speak through that voice. And
Yeah.
all I can do is nurture and cultivate that voice and make it as you know, as much of who I am as I could. And so that's what I did. That was my mindset. And dude, I have never been more focused in my life. I had no social life. Um, all I did was work, study, and gig.
Yeah.
That was
You
it.
committed. You committed.
Totally. I mean, lived and breathed for 3.5 years, nothing but music. And I say this quite literally.
Mm-hmm.
Like my family was back in Birmingham, so all my friends were back in Birmingham, so I had nothing to distract me.
Right.
And so I was very focused and managed to graduate, you know, early actually,
Wow.
and get out of there and get a degree.
Yeah.
But it was a struggle, man. It was a real struggle, but I made it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in all this time, I think you've mentioned at least 3 albums that you had. How old are you at this point? When you started Berklee, how old were you? Do you remember?
I was 29 years old when I started Berklee.
29. Man.
Yeah.
So you've worked a corporate job for 11 years. Go there, put out a few albums, but at this point, you've been in the industry 30 years, let's say, give or take.
At this point,
Yes. Right.
now,
Right now.
yeah, yeah, over 30 years, about maybe 32 years now.
So 32 years, you've put out at least 25 albums.
The 27th one is the one that you just played on. That's the
20,
latest.
27. So I'm 2 behind. That's a lot to keep up with. What is the inspiration, man? First of all, what's the inspiration for doing that much music? And also, what is your process? Because that is almost an album a year. So that means once you put it out, most musicians tour an album or they do shows, you know, whatever your thing is
Right.
for supporting the album.
Right.
That means that you were just going back in the studio, writing, producing, putting it out, going back in the studio over the course of a 30-year career.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the inspiration and what is your process for getting that done?
Well, my major at Berklee is music production and engineering. So I went there specifically because that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
While I was at UPS, I bought a 4-track cassette recorder and completely blew my mind, being able to record music and overdub and multi-track and that kind of thing. I just became totally fascinated with the recording process. And so that's what I went to Berklee to do. And I decided at that point that I was so in love with being in the studio. I was a studio manager at Berklee Studios. So we had like 8 studios.
Oh, wow.
I said, man, I want to get a job at the studio. And when you first get to Berklee and you want to be in that major, they would only allow a certain amount of people in that major per year. And so when I went there, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to get into the major. So after the first semester and I applied, I got in. Man, it was like, I was so excited. I said, I want to work here. So I was a studio manager and, you know, I was just immersed in that whole culture of the recording arts. And that's what I wanted to do. And so I decided very early on that I wanted to be a recording artist, you know, that I wanted to make records. That's what I love doing, probably more than anything. And once I decided to do that, once I made that decision, I said, if you're going to be a recording artist, then you have to constantly create, because you're not just a performing artist. You know, when you're playing gigs, you're a recording artist, and in order to maintain that status, you know, you got to produce, you got to put music out. And so that was always my inspiration. I always said, you know, I want to put out, I want to express myself through music in the studio. It's the one thing that I love to do. It's not something that I set out to do. You know, I didn't set out to do this many albums. It's just, at certain points in my life, I feel like I have something to say, and I go into the studio and I do these albums, and the process is fun to me. It's not like, you know, and also you know my personality too. I like to finish stuff. So when I start on something, I'm going to finish it. I'll figure out a way to get it done, whether I have the money to do it or not. And the first few albums I did, all of those were in the studio. You know, 2-inch tape, you know, the whole deal. And so, you know, it was a real struggle to get those records out. But I was just really determined to do it, and just wound up with a catalog of work, you know, over the years, just by keeping my head down and you know, being that recording artist that I always wanted to be. And my process is just that, you know, trying to maintain, trying to consistently put out work better than the last thing that I did. You know, I still feel like my best album is ahead of me, you know.
Wow.
And that's my drive, my inspiration to just continue to create. There's only been maybe 1 or 2 albums that I feel like, okay, I came real close with these 2.
Really?
Yeah. Southbound album in 2000.
It's one of my favorites.
Evolution album in 2014. I felt like, okay, I got closer than I've ever gotten with those 2 albums. Everything else, I still feel like I can do better.
That's a very optimistic way to look at it, which is great, because like you say, it's a driving force. But you know, I'm gonna name a few records. Your latest one is Songs from the Deep, and I had the opportunity to finally work with you on that one, and I listened to it earlier today, man. It's a mood setter, and I feel that way about all your albums. More is another good one. The Isley Sessions, which was has been one of your biggest sellers. I know I've heard you say that before. Evolution, which you just mentioned. Birmingham, Southbound, Small Talk, the Modern Man recordings, and the list goes on and on and on. And you mentioned just a second ago that Southbound was one of those you felt like you got really close. What is it about that album because that, and you also mentioned Evolution, which are 14 years apart,
Right.
which means, as an artist, as a composer, you grow, over time, and your experiences shape what you're writing, all that kind of stuff. So what about Southbound was one of those that you feel like you hit the dot in the bullseye?
Wow. Yeah, that's an easy question because first of all, it was the personnel. Lil John Roberts on drums, Sean Michael Ray on bass, Kelvin Wooten, first time I'd ever worked with him in the studio on keys, and actually just on organ, piano, and Wurlitzer. That's all he played on that record.
Yeah.
And then Daryl Tibbs on percussion, and it wound up being Melvin Butler on saxophone.
Oh yeah.
So 3/4 of the Modern Man group that I played with for so many years. That was the one thing. The other thing was recording at Fame Studios and Muscle Shoals. Just the vibe, the energy. It's the first time I'd ever been in there to record, and it was one of the high points of my career because I'd always wanted to work there. And there's a certain energy and a vibe in that room that I had never experienced in a recording studio before. And so that contributed to it. Another thing was it was the first record that I did where I was the absolute most prepared.
How so?
From a pre-production standpoint, I knew everything that I was going to do on that record. I had it all written out, and I had it in a notebook, and I knew we were recording this song first, and this is why. We were recording this song second. And I was just the most prepared I've ever been on a record before then and since, I think.
Okay. Wow.
Ways. The primary thing is that it was the second record that I did for Warner Brothers. And the first one that I did was Small Talk. Up until that Small Talk record, I think every record that I had done was a record that I didn't feel any kind of connection to at all. I mean, I wrote songs and performed songs in the studio, and that was even after those 2 Modern Man albums that I did. But I never had a real connection to the music. And I just felt like I was not making music that spoke to who I was as an artist. It spoke to who I wanted to be or who I thought I wanted to be as an artist, which was this jazz fusion guitar player. I was chasing that whole Mike Stern, Schofield, Pat Metheny, kind of thing that everybody at Berklee was into during that time. And it really wasn't who I was as an artist. And I made a conscious decision that I really wanted to revisit those roots and things that made me who I was as an artist. And it's the blues, it's gospel, it's soul music, it's R&B music. And I really wanted to express myself in a very genuine way. And so also it's the first record that I did some covers on, really had to do some covers on. And so, I did all music that had a Southern connection to it in some way, whether it was something that I wrote, whether it was a cover tune, it all had a connection to the South. All of those things combined, along with the fact that we went into the studio at about 10 o'clock that morning, 9 o'clock that morning, and we came out with almost a completely done record in 14 hours later.
Wow.
It was that pure way of recording records where everybody's in the studio at the same time. You got brilliant musicians, and I had written out charts for every song. Everybody was reading charts, and it was all new music. Nobody had ever played it before. And it just went down just almost flawlessly.
Yeah.
And so when I listen back to that record and the purity of it, the way we recorded it, it's just it always stands out as probably my best experience in the recording studio. And it to me really said more than any other record up to that point that it spoke to who I was as an artist and as a person. And also, it was the first concept record that I ever did too. So,
Mm.
it had a concept, it had a theme,
Mm-hmm.
and having that theme for some reason just made everything just cohesive to me. It just felt good. I related to everything in it because of what it was about. And so, for many years until that Evolution album, it was the one for me. It was it was the bar. And Evolution, I think, got really, really close to it. The Evolution album was one where Kelvin and I, along with Marcus Finney, it was the first time we worked as a trio in the studio together. That was in itself an experience. 3 people basically making a record together.
Mm-hmm.
And we just connected on an extremely high level, just the 3 of us making that music. Kelvin and I, another concept record, all about the healing and reconciliation after 50 years later of, past the murder of the 4 girls in the 16th Street Baptist Church. A very deep, sensitive, personal, intimate record, for me growing up in Birmingham. And so it wound up being a really powerful record to me too.
Yeah.
And so I use those 2 as the bars. And hopefully I'll one day feel that way about this new one. You never know.
Yeah.
I don't listen to them much after they're done.
Really?
And then
That's
I go
interesting.
back. Yeah, I go back later because I'm already thinking about the next one. What am I going to do next?
Mm-hmm.
And I already know what I'm going to do next. I already, have it in mind. It's just how am I going to execute it?
So I hope we can do this. You say you already got the next one in mind. So my next question to ask before you said that was going to be going back to this process.
Mm-hmm.
When you start a new album, do you kind of already have the concept, or do you let the songs take shape of the concept? If even down to the personnel, like because Marcus Finney doesn't play in your regular band.
Right.
So to specifically have him in mind to record a record as an artist who's done so many, how do you tap into that process of who you want to use and what direction the songs are actually taking shape? Is that something that organically happens or something that's intentional from the very jump?
It's very intentional. I know.
Okay.
I know. Once I establish what the concept for the record is going to be, like this record, the latest one, Song from the Deep, is revisiting that whole Southbound thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think I've done like 5 records that have a concept that deals with the South. Southbound Birmingham, Somewhere in Alabama, Evolution. It's just a recurring theme that I like to revisit because it's so much of who I am. So on this record, I said songs from the deep South.
Yeah.
It's all about experiences and, the whole 9 living in the South. Once I come up with that concept, once I know what the theme is going to be, the rest is easy. I can write based on that theme. Like Late Night Drive is all about growing up, listening to music, driving around Birmingham, in the family car, back porch, about all the, barbecues and events that we had, in our backyard growing up.
Yeah.
All of those things have a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so Stan, the record, the song that you played on is all about, Representative John Rogers and some of his words. Walk with the Wind is another one that has to do with him, fellow Alabamian, and so it's easy. It's easy after I come up with the concept. The idea seemed to flow, but man, it took me months to come up with that.
Yeah.
Just to think, how am I going to do something that is in the same vein as everything that I've done before, many records that I've done before, but be different.
Have his own identity. Yeah.
Yeah, have his own identity and stands by itself. It doesn't sound like Southbound. It doesn't sound like Evolution. It doesn't sound like Birmingham. but it's about the same stuff, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so once I figure all that out in my brain, the music seems to, it's weird. The music seems to come.
Yeah.
And so all of those songs are based on my coming up with that concept, you know. And that's my process for all of my records. There's very few records that I've done since that Southbound album that aren't rooted in some kind of theme or concept, because it's easier for me to create. The Ozzy Brothers, the Ozzy sessions, my favorite Ozzy Brothers ballads, you know, that was
Yeah.
easy. You know, once I saw them on the Soul Train cruise, um, and was so moved by how great Ronald Steele sounds and how great those songs sounded and the
Yeah.
passion that he sings them with. I was like, man, I
Yes.
gotta do a record of this. You know, the way I'm feeling right now, I want
Mm-hmm.
other people to feel this music. And so that was easy. But yeah, that whole idea of coming up with a concept or a theme makes the rest of the project easy for me.
Yeah. I really want to move on. I got one more question about this recording process.
Uh-huh.
Um, Contemporary jazz has changed so much since you started, and you've lived through the lifespan of contemporary jazz and heard it change.
Yeah.
Your sound has not succumbed to what typical radio is now. How do you stay relevant as a composer and a writer, and yet still stay true to yourself and to where you want to write? Because that's something that I really, really admire when I sit down and learn and play your music, is that I play with a lot of different people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you do.
And I know the formulas for a
Yeah.
lot of songs, and the way people write and the way they try to make it fit for radio programming.
Mhm.
That's not what you do, but you still have the same success as a lot of those artists that's coming in. So for inspiring composers out there who want to stay true to themselves with their writing, but then still want to be able to stay relevant to what's happening in the industry and for radio,
Mhm.
what's your intention behind that?
Wow, that's a great question, because and I was thinking in preparation, getting my mind prepped for this interview. I was thinking today about how I have not followed that path of writing songs for radio or writing songs thinking commercially about the music. I have
Mm-hmm.
intentionally, throughout my entire recording career, um, not tried to do that, not tried to make music that will
Yeah.
work on radio, to my absolute detriment, I
Wow.
think.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that had I been more intentional, and had I tried to be more commercial, and had I written stuff that I knew would get played on the radio, had I done that throughout my career, I would be a lot more successful than I am now. But for some reason, man, I just never could do it. I just never could do it. I,
Let me say
I
this. I'm so glad you didn't. I know that's a tough thing to say, and
yeah,
and because what we look at and what we plaster on the wall as success,
yeah,
looking back on a career, like, to be proud of your catalog, to be proud of that, you stayed true. I'm personally glad you didn't. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But I'm gonna let you finish. I just had to say that because that, to me, that's very, very important.
yeah. And I thought about it today, and I had kind of a little moment about it. You know, I said,
Hmm.
man, how much further along would I be in my career? Would I it had I decided, that I wanted to be more intentional about being commercial, and
Hmm.
I just, or would I feel the same way about my music when I look back at my catalog? Would I feel the same pride that
Yeah.
I had I done that?
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and I don't think that I would, man.
No.
I really don't. I
No.
don't think that I would. I feel proud of the fact that, I may not have as many likes on Facebook or as many streams on Spotify, but I can look back at my catalog and say, hey, man, I did the music that I felt was in my heart for that
Yeah.
reason, not to be commercial. But you know, like I said, it's absolutely been to my detriment, and I realize that that's something that I have to accept. But I do have a lot of pride in the music that I've made. I've had some success though, you know, in spite of my seems like my intention to not be successful. In spite of it, I still had success. You know, I've had #1 records, and I've sold some records. You know, not nearly as much as Norman Brown or Benson or some of the guys that I really look up to in this industry. But I've sold some records, and there are people who like what I do, and I'm so grateful for those people. I'm like probably more so than a lot of artists in some respects, because they're listening to my music and they like what I do simply because it's what I do, not because it sounds like anybody else. And I'm grateful, man. When I try to answer every single post when people say something nice about my music. I try to respond, because they don't have to do that. They don't have to reach out to me or anything like that on social media and say those kinds of things. So when they accept me for who I am, I really, really do appreciate that.
Right. You've also produced your own festivals. You've had the Preserve Festival. You've had Eric Essix Jazz Escape. How do you put down the guitar for a minute, pick up your business hat, and go into that mode, and still because it's still music,
Right.
you just do it in a different avenue. So what is that process for you, and what even led you down to start doing your own festivals?
Yeah, traveling all around the world and doing festivals over the years, it's just always been something that I said that I wanted to bring to the Birmingham community, because we've had some great festivals in Birmingham. We had City Stages for many years, the Heritage Festival for many years, and we've had during that time. 2007 was when I started the Preserve Festival. We'd had some big festivals in Birmingham, but to me, never one that was specifically geared to get to jazz music. Everything about it was jazz music. And so that was something that I always wanted to do and bring to our community. It's something that I thought that we needed in our community. And so that was the motivation. And it just happened. It so happens that the perfect storm happened. So City Stages was gone. The Heritage Festival was gone. There were no outdoor events happening in the Birmingham area when I started the Preserve Festival.
Timing.
So, I started that thing thinking, man, if we get 500 people out here, if we get 500 people to buy tickets to this thing, I'll be ecstatic. This will be great. I'll call it a win. And we had 2,500 people show up the first year. And I was like, whoa.
Wow.
And the concept, the idea that I had to make it an event where people could bring their own food, where you could bring your own beverages and just chill out for the whole day and listen to music. And it was something that resonated with people, And so my thinking behind the whole event was just basically to serve the community, to give people jazz and let them hear music in a way that they, where they weren't being served before. And I found, I've heard the old adage that people say about business: find a need and then fill it.
Right.
It just so happens that there was a void there, and we filled it at just the right time.
Yeah.
And did that festival for 7-8 years. And people came, they came, and I think at the height of it was year 5 or 6, and we had people as far as you could see at that thing. And the same thing with the Jazz Escape. Nobody was doing that type of event at a hotel. I went to Earl Clue's event, his jazz thing. I was like, man, I got to do something like this in Birmingham.
Yeah.
We did it and had 2 great years with that. And after that, I said, you know what? There were so many other events that started to come online. I didn't want to compete with. And so I
Yeah.
just bowed out gracefully. But yeah, doing those kinds of things, again, it's the sense of accomplishment, seeing everything come together at the end is the thing that, and people leave having had a great experience listening to jazz music.
Yeah.
It's so satisfying to me. And so, yeah, that's why I did it for about 10 years, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. Incredible.
Yeah.
You also, for at least the last decade, have been a staff member at the local university, which is UAB in Birmingham. Talk about your position there, because whenever I think about it, I didn't know that those type of jobs actually existed. Outside of just playing the piano, and a lot of musicians don't. And for younger musicians who thinking, look, I'll tell you one thing that happened to me a while ago. I did a Facebook post about 7 or 8 years ago, and I talked about retiring. And somebody told me, like, musicians don't retire.
Right.
And there's a thought process, and for some that's cool. But the idea of retiring for me was not necessarily that I didn't want to play anymore.
Right.
I didn't want to have to play to earn a living.
Right.
When I get to a certain place, and I'm bringing all this stuff up because to me, you set different things in place and different avenues in place, still within the music industry, that has allowed you and afforded you rather to do some different things and not be tied to, if I don't have my guitar in my hand and I'm not out at a club at 2 a.m. packing up, or if I'm not at a festival, flying all around all year, because while that's great, after you've done that maybe 20 years, then as me personally, I want something else. I want another challenge. I want something else. So speak to your position at UAB and what kind of opportunities has that afforded you as a musician?
Sure. So I'm the director of programming at the Alys Performing Arts Center. And my job is to basically book the artists and the talent for the center, but not in a haphazard kind of way. It's a position that really my responsibility is to curate the season, or any given season for the center, and try to, in my mind, serve the entire community. So you've got a community like Birmingham that's very diverse. You've got all kinds of ethnicities, age groups, and just a wide demographic. How do I bring artists and entertainment to the center that's going to serve that entire community? And so that's the way I look at my position. I curate the season in a way that serves the entire community on behalf of the university. And also, as a part of, after being at the center for a number of years, I was really, really blessed by Dr. Ray Watts and Dr. Shirley Kahn to get a position as an artist in residence at the university. So now, not only am I doing my job as director of programming, but I'm acting sort of as an ambassador for the university, and also programming and creating programs and residencies, throughout the season that impact students and the community in my position as artist in residence. So, UAB has been extremely good to me in so many ways, but primarily now I get to express myself in a completely, totally different way, through the kind of artists that I bring to the center in the attempt to serve the community. And I enjoy it almost as much as I do everything else that I'm involved with, because I know that at the end of the day, it's going to make people happy. It's going to inform people. We get to work with students, and you've worked with several of the programs that I've done that have impacted students. And it's just all of these various facets of the position that serve different kinds of things, serve my own personal needs as an artist, and also serve the community. I think that the Alys Stephens Center is, I've always said, the cultural oasis for the city of Birmingham. I think it's the center of the arts. I had an opportunity to do a Meet the Artist at the very first performance I did, and it was packed with students. And it was an amazing experience because we felt like we really interacted with the students in a very positive way. And fast forward to this year's performance here in the Jemison Concert Hall. Of course, there was more energy. At one point, you know, the kids were doing the wave, and it was, I looked out in the audience from the stage and saw all those kids, you know, doing that at the same time. And, you know, for some reason, it was just an emotional experience for me because it proved that we had somehow connected. And we've just seen experiences like that time and time again, where young people have said to us, you know, I'm so glad that I was here. I'm so glad I experienced this. It made me want to learn an instrument. It made me want to experience jazz. You know, I've never even experienced a live jazz performance. So the Alys Stephens Center has been a tremendous supporter and facilitator of the arts for me personally, and I think for the community as well. I don't think there's anything like it in this community. This is the best Birmingham I think I've seen in a long time. And I'm just thankful that we have it. You know, a place where you can get classical, you can get jazz, you can get rock music, you can get dance, you know, visual arts. Just anything you can think of, we've had it here at the Alys Stephens Center, and that is a blessing for our community.
It's really incredible. When we go out to those schools, and whether they're elementary and just see the kids, man, who connect to what we're doing, you know, come up and ask questions. They want to touch the instruments. You know, there's a lot of schools that are taking that privilege, you know, away and taking those programs away, and those kids, they don't have an outlet. They don't have anybody to reach out and touch, you know. So once I saw kind of what this was and the connection that was made, you know, I really, really jumped on board. I really appreciate you pulling me in on a lot of stuff.
Man, it's been great having you, and it's something that I've been doing since, I guess the very first one that I did was in 1993 with that Modern Man group. And every year, pretty much without fail, we go to at least, you know, 5 to 10 schools and present those programs. And they can be anything from, you know, history of jazz, history of Black music in America, the history of the music of the civil rights movement. You know, we've done a ton of different programs. I'm proud of each one, and it just, you know, it's my way of being able to give back to the community and to let kids see, you know, bands in some of these rural communities that we play in, which is predominantly the rural communities. Some of these, you know, young students have never even seen a jazz band or heard a jazz band, seen one live.
Absolutely.
Or even seen musicians that play the kind of music that we play up close.
Absolutely. I didn't.
Real privilege.
I didn't see it growing up, you know.
Yeah, you know.
And I think it would tune my ear to something else if I did, you know. And I had the gospel background, which is great. Yeah. But the thing I gravitated to was jazz. So if I had been exposed to it earlier, so I think that's very, very important, man.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very important.
Very important. Yeah, I don't take it for granted for a second.
Yeah. Well, brother, anything you want to add? We've covered a lot tonight. Everything that I pretty much wanted to talk about, you know, which is why I chose you. The first guitarist I've had. And
cool.
While I know the guitar is a thing, there's so much other stuff that people don't know that you do that I really wanted them to know, and even expose musicians to the other ideas in the music industry, that these are opportunities too that are sitting out here waiting, and people are filling them. You know, just because you're not aware and not exposed to them doesn't mean that these kind of opportunities don't exist out here.
Sure. Yeah. I've just, like I said, man, I you know, when I have these opportunities and these platforms, I like to give praise to God because, you know, as I said earlier, you know, you have to begin to look at your career look at the arc of your career, especially at the point where I am now with my career, and I look at the arc of it, and everybody's career has an arc. You know, you have a peak and a decline of on some level. You know, some people's is a sharp decline, and some people's it's a gradual decline.
Right.
And I like to think that mine is on that gradual, you know, trend, that it plateaued, that it's plateauing, and I've just been so incredibly blessed and for the opportunities, man, you know, that have just kind of come my way. A lot of them I wasn't even seeking out. You know, a lot of them have just been being in the right place at the right time, and God just dropping these things in my lap. And you know, so I just want to give praise to Him for taking care of me and my family, and giving me a career in this business, because you know a lot of people don't have that. You know, with any longevity in some cases, and so it's just a real blessing to be able to have that, and I'm humbled by it. I don't take it for granted for a second, and I look forward to helping people, my fellow musicians and my community, and all those things, man. Just the opportunity to be able to do that is mind-boggling to me at this point in my life, to still be able to do it. So I'm humbled, man. Yeah.
I just thought of another question. we talked about music mentors, but once again, let's put the guitar down.
Okay.
That determination that you have, and something you said earlier, to finish stuff, and to actually have a drive to succeed at other stuff, and whatever you put your mind to. Are there any books that you've read or mentors that you saw from afar, up close, that kind of, you know, you grabbed on to, and it's like, okay, this is a concept that I apply to my everyday life. Now, it has nothing to do with music, but I applied the music too. You know what I mean? Or are there any mentors or books out there that you've read?
Oh, wow. Books that I've read, you know, the one book about, well, there are a couple. I read Quincy Jones's biography, Berry Gordy's biography. I'm a huge fan of studying the lives of people. Miles Davis's biography. You know, I read Coltrane's biography. Louis Armstrong's biography. I read biographies of tons of different musicians, and I tell you, man, that has really, really impacted me as an individual. It's impacted my thinking, and it's so inspiring to me to read about these people who have done these incredible things in their careers, and it just makes me want to get out there and try to emulate, you know, and try to find my own path. And I promise you, when you talk about things that I've read, it's those biographies that have really inspired me more than anything, you know. And put the profanity aside, Miles Davis's autobiography is
that's one of my favorites. That's the one that did it for me.
Yeah, I read that thing, you know, at least 5 or 6 times all the way through.
Yeah.
It's just his career, his determination to always be different and to always go for what he wanted to do, in spite of what anybody else said. He was always like, this is what the kind of music I want to make. This is how I want to express myself. And I kind of picked up that you know, that attitude and run with it. Not to say I'm in the same camp with Miles Davis.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
You know, yeah. But it's just the life that he led. It was so inspiring to me on so many levels, and it pushed me to want to emulate him in so many positive ways. And so when I talk about things that I've read, his book would be number one, and then all the others that I've read as well. But my up close and personal model was my mom, who was an entrepreneur and who did so many things to try to start businesses on her own and of her own early in life. And she never found that one that really worked for her until she started making eyeglasses. And she started her own retail optical store back in the 70s, you know, Black woman Birmingham, Alabama, being able to start a business like that on her own, it was pretty impressive. And it always impressed me that she was able to do that, and always, just had so much success with what she did, but she worked hard, and so that was my direct model. I watched her and her career and what she was able to do. And so it had a great impact on me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah. So this is one area of my career that I haven't been good with, and I'm starting to get a little bit better. But people can find me on Facebook, on social media. I've got a couple of Facebook pages, but the one that I really want to direct people to is my artist and band page. Still Eric Essix on Facebook, and Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter, not very active on Twitter, but I'm on there. But primarily my website, ericessix.net. That's where you can find out about all the projects that I've got going on. And if you register your name on my site, you can get a free download of one of my favorite songs, and I just encourage people to go to ericessix.net, check me out, find out where I'm going to be. COVID has pretty much done a lot of damage to the touring industry for us. But what I've tried to do is to still, embrace the technology. And I've been kind of hesitant to do any streaming shows when it first started out, but I've really kind of embraced the technology, and I love it, man. Being able to get out there and do these shows online in a virtual format. So I have a show coming up at the Alys Stevens Center called Holiday Soul, which people in Birmingham have seen the last 4 installments of. And we're bringing it back this year, and we're going to do it in a drive-in format. And you can also, if you have a virtual arts pass at the Alys Stevens Center, you can stream it to your home and check out some incredible artists. Wes is going to be on keyboards on that show, and we got Joey Somerville and Kim Scott and Kelly O'Neill and incredible vocalist Leonard Julian, who's going to be with us on that show. And then right before that, I'm doing a show which will be streamed with a small audience too, actually, of about 100 people at Auburn's new Performing Arts Center, the Gauche Performing Arts Center. And that'll be on December the 3rd. And then we've got some other events coming up next year, man. Gulfport Jazz Festival. We're doing a show February 14th, Valentine's Day at BJCC in Birmingham, Alabama, with my old boss, Peebo Bryson and Najee and Will Downing and a bunch of other great artists. So all my shows are going to be at on my website, ericessix.net, and hopefully we'll have more and more added for next season, man.
Last question.
Yep.
What conversation would you have with your younger self? We done talked about a lot. You got a lot of experiences, and on and off the stage. What conversation would you have with your younger self? Let's say 25-year-old Eric Essix.
Wow. Boy, I have never had that question. That is a great question.
Okay, good.
Probably the best question I've ever gotten in an interview.
Look at me.
That's really making me think, because kind of what we just talked about, in wanting to be, what kind of artist do you want to be? I would have asked myself that question at 25, more specifically, not just the guy that plays guitar. What kind of artist do you want to be? And be more intentional about how to approach it, how to monetize it, how to capitalize on it. Because when I started out, all I wanted to do was just make records and play.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really thinking as much about the business as I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, I would tell my younger self to be more conscious of what you do, be more intentional about what you do as a business person in the music business. And I think that a lot of the things that I probably would like to have seen myself do differently in terms of making a living in this business, I would try to have directed my younger self towards those things. If I could have a conversation with 25-year-old Eric Essix. That's a great question.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, man. And hey, dude, thank you so much for all that you do and for doing this series and giving people an opportunity to see and listen to so many great musicians. I went back and listened to Sam Sims today, and Greg Fillinganes, and these kinds of things weren't available to me when I was a young musician coming up, and it would have meant so much to me to hear those guys talk about the things they talked about. So for you to do this, and hopefully young people listen to it and see it and absorb this stuff, man, my hat's off to you, man. It's just great.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you, man. That means a lot.
Yeah,
a whole lot. Yeah, I really hope I'm doing this. The fans like to know.
Yeah.
But I'm really doing it for younger musicians.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want them to have an easier road, an easier path to the knowledge. You know what I mean? More than anything, it's up to them what they do with it.
Yeah.
But if I can just put it out there, it's that old saying: you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. I mean, I've built great relationships in this industry, and I thank everybody who comes on. Like it means a lot to me that they say yes to even come on and say, I'm going to share what my journey has taught me to be able to, pass it on to the next generation. And hopefully they'll do the same, because to me, that's the only way we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got all these tools. So awesome.
Yeah.
Well, bro, thank you for coming on. And I will see you soon, brother.
Yeah. See you in a little bit.
Appreciate you, man.
Peace.
All right. Peace.